I poured the wine like I always do. My mother-in-law smiled and said, "That's why we keep you around." I smiled back and said, "You're drinking at my resort now." For years, I was just a ghost in their perfect world, a convenient accessory to their lavish lives, silently absorbing every cutting remark and dismissive glance. But what they didn't know was that while they were busy ignoring me, I was meticulously planning the ultimate betrayal, one that would tear down their kingdom and finally show them who I truly was. I remember standing there at the entrance of Pine Rock Lake Resort, my clipboard a flimsy shield against the towering Montana mountains, which seemed to mock my insignificance. It was the same ritual year after year, the same family, the same invisible me. First came Charlene's silver Lexus, glinting like a jewel as it wound up the drive. My mother-in-law, a perfectly coiffed vision in designer sunglasses, didn't even glance my way. She just handed me her Louis Vuitton luggage, a silent demand, not a question about my drive, not a comment about the weather. Just Valerie, a bare acknowledgement of my existence. "Good to see you too, Charlene," I muttered under my breath, adding another tally mark to the endless scoreboard of slights. It was year 11, day 1. Then Paige, my sister-in-law, screeched to a halt in her red BMW convertible, her voice booming across the parking lot about some record-breaking deal. She waved distractedly in my general direction. "Let me call you back. Family stuff." Family stuff. As if I even qualified. I ticked their names off my clipboard, my own private tally of their condescension. Joel, my husband, always arrived last. His sensible sedan, dusty from the drive, was a stark contrast to their flashy cars. He'd give me a quick peck on the cheek, a kiss that felt heavy with an apology. He wasn't brave enough to voice, "Everything okay?" he'd ask. I just nodded. What else could I do? Tell him that after 10 years, I was suffocating under the weight of his family's dismissal? That each passing year chipped away another piece of the woman he married? Perfect, I lied. That evening, the resort restaurant glowed with amber light, the windows reflecting the sunset on the lake, casting a golden hue over white tablecloths and crystal glasses. I'd spent weeks planning every detail of this gathering, making sure it would be absolutely flawless. When there was a lull in conversation, I tried to interject. I just finalized the contract for the Westlake project. The Renewable Energy Initiative should. Darling, Charlene cut in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Would you mind checking if they have those crackers you fetched last year, the ones with the seeds?" Joel, bless his heart, suddenly found the difference between poached and grilled salmon absolutely fascinating. "Of course," I said, pushing back my chair, a familiar ache in my chest. When I returned with the crackers, Paige was mid-story about some celebrity client. She paused just long enough to stage whisper to Joel's cousin, "Valerie has such a helpful nature, so accommodating." The word hit me like a physical blow. Accommodating. It was a word for hotel staff, for service providers, not for equals. Joel shifted uncomfortably beside me, but said nothing. His silence roared in my ears. I remembered last Christmas when I organized the entire Benton family gathering, 32 people, coordinating travel from 4 states, planning menus around 3 different food allergies. And when they gathered for photos, Charlene's gentle suggestion, "Valerie, would you mind taking this one? Just the family. Just the family." Or the dinner celebrating my promotion when Uncle Richard asked what I actually did all day, then talked over my answer to ask Joel about his semester grading. But it was last summer's retreat that truly broke something inside me. We sat on this very terrace, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Paige had laughed at my detailed itinerary for the week. "You'd make a great office assistant, Val, super organized." Charlene had nodded thoughtfully. "Some women are just better behind the scenes, dear." That night, while Joel slept, I walked to the dock alone. The water was black glass, reflecting a canopy of stars. I pulled out my phone and typed an email to a college friend in real estate syndication. Subject, That opportunity we discussed. For 9 months, I moved through my life like a ghost with a fierce, quiet purpose. Meetings. In hotel lobbies during work conferences, document reviews at our kitchen table while Joel graded papers. The final signing happened on a Tuesday afternoon in April. My hand didn't shake at all. And now, here I was, back at the resort entrance, watching Charlene hand me her luggage, just like always. But this time, there was a difference she couldn't see. My name was on the deed. I'd spent a decade being invisible. Tomorrow, they'd finally see me. And they wouldn't like what they saw. Not one bit. The next day, I watched from the resort lobby window as the valet accepted Charlene's keys. Without the usual flourish. No rushing, no special smiles, just the standard professionalism we'd implemented for all guests. Her face tightened almost imperceptibly, the first ripple in her perfect world. "Ma'am, would you like assistance with your bags?" he asked, exactly as instructed. Charlene blinked, momentarily thrown. For 10 years, her bags had simply vanished too. Her cabin. "You'll, of course I would." Behind her, Paige slammed her car door, phone still glued to her ear. She tossed her keys at the next valet, who caught them without the deferential bow she was accustomed to. I slipped away before they entered, retreating to my new office. The resort manager, Thomas, awaited me with our morning reports. "Everything going according to the new protocols?" I asked, settling into my Italian leather chair, my one indulgence when updating the space. "Perfectly," he said, his eyes crinkling with something between amusement and respect. Though Mrs. Benton seemed surprised when I addressed her as ma'am instead of by name. "Imagine that," I murmured, reviewing the cabin assignments. "Families all in their usual spots?" "Yes, but without the complimentary wine baskets and pre-stocked refrigerators they're used to." I nodded, satisfaction warming my chest. "Standard welcome packages only. No exceptions." When I joined them for dinner, they'd been stewing for hours. The restaurant hummed with a pleasant conversation of regular guests, but our table radiated tension like a cracked reactor. "Valerie," Charlene began, setting down her water glass with precision. "Have you noticed the service isn't what it used to be?" I tilted my head with practiced innocence. "How so?" The valet barely looked at me when I arrived. Paige interjected, scrolling through her phone. "And my cabin's minibar wasn't stocked with the view I specifically requested last year." "Perhaps management changed hands," I suggested, unfolding my napkin. Uncle Richard snorted. "Heard some faceless investor bought in, probably squeezing every penny from the place." He gestured broadly, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his glass. "These types never understand tradition or quality." Joel shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Maybe we should leave a review. Might help them improve." "What an inspired suggestion," I said, my voice neutral while my stomach nodded. With a decade of swallowed responses. "The sheets aren't even the Egyptian cotton we've grown accustomed to," Charlene continued, as if testing how many complaints she could fit into a single breath. "And I had to ask twice for more towels." I sipped my wine, the California Cabernet, tasting particularly rich tonight. "I'm sure management is doing their best." "Their best isn't good enough," Paige snapped. "Not for what we pay." A server approached, nodding respectfully in my direction, a small acknowledgement that went unnoticed by everyone except Joel, whose brow furrowed slightly. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, rising. "I need to make a quick call." There. Complaints faded as I walked through the restaurant toward the back offices. Thomas met me in the hallway, holding a leather portfolio. "Everything you requested, Miss Benton." Inside my temporary office, I opened the portfolio. 10 years of meticulously documented entitlements spread before me in neat columns and formal complaints. Pages unauthorized. Subletting of their cabin during peak season, charging premium rates while the resort received only the family's discounted payment. Uncle Richard's lease agreement with special rates expired 3 years ago but mysteriously honored each season. 27 documented complaints from housekeeping staff about Charlene's treatment, including one incident where she demanded a housekeeper unpack and organize her lingerie. My fingers traced the staff notes. The Benton family arrival week is our most requested vacation time among staff, one manager had written. Unfortunately, not in a good way. I closed the portfolio, something cold and clear, crystallizing in my chest. This wasn't just about me. It never was. When I returned to the table, Joel was attempting to smooth Paige's ruffled feathers. I'm sure they'll fix whatever issues you're having with the cabin before tomorrow, he offered. They'd better, she replied. I've already promised Jennifer she could use it next month. She's paying a premium for lakefront access. The portfolio felt heavy in my hands as I retook my seat. Joel noticed it immediately. Work stuff, he asked. Something like that, I answered, placing it beside my plate. Resort business, actually. Charlene's eyebrows lifted. Don't tell me. You're consulting for this place now, though they certainly need the help. Not exactly. Consulting, I said, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. Uncle Richard guffawed. What then? They've got you fetching extra crackers for the whole resort now. The table erupted in practiced laughter, the kind that had been at my expense for a decade. I didn't join in. Instead, I opened the portfolio and withdrew a single page. Actually, I said, sliding it toward Paige, I wanted to discuss your subletting arrangement. Her laughter died instantly. My what? Your habit of renting out the family cabin to your clients. At a considerable markup, I might add. The blood drained from her face so quickly I wondered if she might faint. That's ridiculous. Who told you that? Resort records, I replied. Very thorough ones. Charlene's eyes narrowed. Valerie, what exactly are you playing at? I looked around the table at each of them, these people who'd dismissed me for so long they'd forgotten I might be watching. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Soon, everything would change. But tonight, I simply smiled. Just gathering information. Isn't that what you've always said I'm good at, Paige? Being super organized? I closed the portfolio. Soon, they'd learn exactly what I'd organized. A week later, I sat in the back corner of the Lakeside Bistro, my third meeting spot this month. Different city, different coffee shop, same purpose. My consulting portfolio rested on the polished table, renewable energy feasibility studies neatly organized inside. But today it was just a prop. These projections look solid, Marcus said, sliding the real paperwork back across the table, resort acquisition documents hidden between environmental impact assessments. His eyes, shrewd behind wire-rimmed glasses, held a question. You're sure about this, Valerie? It's a significant investment. I've never been more certain of anything. My voice sounded different. These days, lower, steadier. The voice of someone with a purpose beyond accommodation. He nodded, collecting his coffee cup. The others are impressed with your strategy. Using the renewable angle to justify the zoning changes was brilliant. A small smile touched my lips. I do know my field. 10 years of being the helpful, quiet daughter-in-law taught me one valuable lesson. People who don't see you also don't notice what you're learning about them. Back at home that evening, Joel graded papers at the dining table, his red pen marking student essays with the same methodical precision I'd applied to my own project. I spread my consulting work beside him, our elbows occasionally brushing in domesticated harmony. Heavy workload, he asked without looking up. Just finalizing that Montana project. Not a lie. The best secrets hide in plain sight. His pen paused. The renewable thing? Yes. I shuffled through permits that would reveal everything if he bothered to read them. The solar installation should offset nearly 40% of operational costs. He nodded, attention already returning to his students' work. That's nice, Val. 8 words about my career. Then silence. The next afternoon, I excused myself from a faculty luncheon at the university where Joel teaches. Sorry, work call, I explained, and no one questioned it. They never did. In my car, I Dialed into the conference call that would transfer the first payment from my personal accounts. Money I'd saved over a decade while Joel's family assumed I was just a consultant. Money that would purchase what they valued most. Miss Benton, we've received confirmation of the wire transfer, my attorney said. The syndication group is impressed with your capital contribution. 10 years of careful saving adds up, I replied, watching Joel's colleagues through the restaurant window. They'd already closed the small gap where I sat, conversation flowing uninterrupted around my absence. The first time Joel took me to Pine Rock Lake Resort, Charlene made a point of explaining its significance. The Bentons have been coming here for generations, she'd said, her voice dripping with ancestral pride. They know us here. What she didn't know was how I listened to the staff when they thought no one was paying attention. How I noticed the general manager's frustration when the owners refused improvements. How I recognized the potential in the aging property with its perfect lakefront location. What she didn't know is that I had spent my career analyzing infrastructure potential and making things work when others couldn't see the possibilities. That night, after finalizing the first phase of acquisition, I lay awake beside Joel, his breathing even, peaceful. He had no idea that I'd mortgaged our future together on this gamble. Joel, I whispered, knowing he wouldn't wake. I'm buying Pine Rock. Saying it aloud felt both terrifying and liberating. My heart pounded hard enough that I pressed my palm against my chest, certain the drumming would wake him. It didn't. In the morning, I checked my secure email while Joel showered. The resort's general manager had responded to my confidential inquiry with pages of documentation, staffing issues deferred, maintenance, special arrangements for legacy guests, including detailed records of the Benton family's annual demands. I forwarded everything to my attorneys with 2 words, as expected. 3 weeks later, I met with the investment group in Denver, 7 people around a conference table reviewing final projections for the property acquisition. The environmental upgrades will increase value by at least 15% within 18 months, I explained, pointing to charts I'd prepared. Tax incentives cover nearly 30% of installation costs. And your personal interest in this property? Asked Sandra, the group's most skeptical member. I maintained eye contact. I know it intimately. I understand its potential and its limitations. I've visited annually for a decade. What I didn't say, I know which cabin has plumbing issues every spring. I know which staff members deserve promotion. I know which family has been exploiting loopholes in rental agreements for years. Your expertise in renewable infrastructure is impressive, Sandra conceded. But taking operational control rather than just advisory status is unusual for someone with your background. I smiled. Sometimes management requires someone who sees what others miss. On the day I signed the final papers, I wore a blue blazer I purchased for myself, not the burgundy one Charlene once suggested would suit my coloring better. My hand was steady as I signed my name on the line that made me managing partner with full operational control. The attorney slid the resort's master keys across the mahogany table. Congratulations, Miss Benton. Pine Rock Lake Resort is now under your direction. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I simply allowed myself one deep breath of acknowledgement. A decade of careful navigation had led to this moment. That night, Joel asked about my day while microwaving leftovers. Busy, I said. Finalized. That big project. The Montana thing? He stirred pasta without looking up. Yes. I watched him, wondering if he heard the difference in my voice. He didn't. The Montana thing. 2 months later, I arrived at Pine Rock Lake Resort one day before the annual family retreat. The general manager greeted me at the entrance, no clipboard in sight. Everything is prepared according to your specifications, Miss Benton, he said, leading me toward what was now my office. Thank you, Richard. I paused at the threshold, taking in the view of the mountains through floor-to-ceiling windows. And the staff understand the protocols for tomorrow's arrivals? Absolutely. The Benton family will receive exactly the same treatment as any other guests. His smile held no malice, just professional satisfaction. No more, no less. I nodded, setting my briefcase on the desk that now belonged to me. Perfect. Tomorrow, Charlene Silver. Lexus would wind up the Treeline Drive. She'd hand her Louis Vuitton luggage to the valet with barely a glance. Paige would arrive, talking loudly on her phone about property values and commission rates. And I'd be waiting. Not with a clipboard, but with a deed. The next day, I stood at the window of our lakeside cabin, watching the afternoon light glitter across Pine Rock Lake. Behind me, Joel rummaged through his suitcase, humming tunelessly. He had no idea what was coming. Did you see Uncle Richard bring that awful green sweater again? Joel chuckled, holding up his own neatly pressed button-down. The one with the elbow patches? I nodded, not turning from the window. Some things never change. But some things do. The resort staff moved differently today. Their eyes met mine with a new awareness. Small nods exchanged. When Joel wasn't looking, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the general manager. Everything prepared for tonight's announcement. Just say the word. You've been quiet, Joel said, approaching to stand beside me. His hand touched my shoulder, familiar yet somehow foreign. Everything okay? Perfect, I replied. The same answer I'd given for 10 years. Through the window, I spotted Charlene and Paige walking toward the main lodge, Charlene's hand rising to snap her fingers at a groundskeeper who didn't respond. Her face tightened with indignation as she said something to Paige, who nodded vigorously. We should head down, Joel said, checking his watch. Mom likes to have drinks before dinner. Asterisk Mom likes it. Mom prefers. Mom expects. Asterisk. The mantra of our marriage. I'll meet you there, I said. I need to make a quick call. His brow furrowed momentarily before smoothing out. Work stuff. Something like that. After he left, I opened my leather portfolio, the one I once referred to as my little folder of tasks. Inside rested the future of Pine Rock Lake Resort, signed in triplicate. I ran my fingers over the embossed leather, remembering the night I decided enough was enough. The resort bar glowed in amber when I arrived 30 minutes later. Crystal glasses caught the light like prisms, throwing tiny rainbows across white tablecloths. Joel's family had claimed their usual corner table, Charlene holding court in a coral blouse that probably cost more than my first car. Valerie, there you are, she said without looking up from her martini. We were just discussing the decline in service standards. Oh, I slid into the remaining chair at the edge of the table, naturally. The valet barely acknowledged me, Paige huffed, tapping bright red nails against her wine glass. And our cabin is missing the welcome basket with those European chocolates. Uncle Richard leaned forward, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his glass. Someone said some faceless investor group bought the place, probably squeezing every penny. Joel nodded sympathetically. Maybe we should leave a review, might help them improve. I sipped my wine slowly, feeling its warmth spread through my chest. I'm sure management is doing their best with the transition. Well, their best isn't good enough, Charlene declared. I've been coming here for 20 years, and the staff used to know exactly how I like things. I caught the eye of Emma, the bartender who'd worked here since before I met Joel. She gave me the slightest wink. Emma knew exactly who owned Pine Rock now. I heard they're planning renovations, I offered. Sustainable energy upgrades, lakefront restoration. Paige waved this away. God, that sounds dreadful. They'll ruin the charm with all that modern nonsense. Speaking of our cabin, she continued, leaning toward Uncle Richard, I have a client who would pay top dollar to use it next month during the photography festival. We could split the profit. Like last year. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Another text from Marcus. Documents ready in the office whenever you're ready. Excuse me, I said, rising from my chair. I need to check something. The restroom is down the hall, dear, Charlene said dismissively. I didn't correct her. Instead, I walked with measured steps toward the manager's office, past framed photographs of the mountains in every season. The door bore a discreet brass plaque, Management. I knocked. Once before entering, Marcus stood as I closed the door behind me. Miss Benton, everything's ready. Show me. He slid a folder across the polished desk. Inside were printouts of complaints, invoices, and emails spanning a decade. The subletting situation? I asked. Documented thoroughly. Marcus pointed to a spreadsheet. Miss Page has been renting out the family cabin during peak seasons for at least 5 years. No permission granted. No revenue. Shared with the resort. I nodded, scanning further. And Richard's lease? Expired 3 years ago. He's been paying 2018 rates through a verbal agreement with the previous owner. The next page made my breath catch. A formal complaint from housekeeping staff about Charlene's behavior. Last summer, guest threw clothing at staff member when items were returned with insufficient pressing. The staff, I began. Marcus's expression softened. They've dreaded the Benton family's arrival for years. Your mother-in-law has filed 17 complaints about specific staff members in the past decade. 3 employees quit rather than work during your family stays. My family. The phrase stuck like a fishbone in my throat. And the announcement. Arrangements. He straightened. Champagne will be served with the main course. I'll make the introduction at 7:45 precisely. I closed the folder, tucking it under my arm. Perfect. When I returned to the table, Joel gave me a questioning look. Everything okay? You were gone for a while. Just finalizing some details, I replied, settling back into my seat. Charlene sipped her fresh martini. Valerie, be a dear and ask if they have those little bacon-wrapped dates. The waitstaff is ignoring us completely. I met her eyes directly, something I rarely did. I think we should wait for the main course, Charlene. I hear there's going to be a special announcement tonight. An announcement? She frowned. What could possibly be important? Enough to interrupt dinner. I smiled. You'll see. An hour later, I stood just outside the dining room, taking a final, steadying breath. The mahogany doors framed the scene like a portrait, my husband's family seated at their usual table. By the windows, lake waters shimmering behind them in the evening light. Charlene raised her wineglass to her lips, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Paige gestured dramatically to Joel's Uncle Richard, who nodded with exaggerated importance. Joel saw me first. His brow furrowed slightly, perhaps noticing something different in my posture. I was no longer hunched against their judgment. Everything okay, Val? He asked as I slipped into my chair. Perfect. Timing, I said, signaling discreetly to Marcus, the general manager. We'd rehearsed this moment. During our early morning meeting, the staff, positioned strategically around the dining room, caught my eye one by one: Emma at the bar, Robert by the service station, Teresa near the kitchen. Doors. Small nods, almost imperceptible. A battalion assembled for a battle the enemy didn't know was coming. Charlene interrupted my thoughts. I was just telling everyone about the appalling service at check-in. Someone should really speak to management. She pronounced management with a disdain usually reserved for discussing vermin. Did you have a specific complaint? I asked, unfolding my napkin across my lap. The young man at reception didn't recognize us. Can you imagine? After all these years, having to spell out my name like some random tourist. She turned to Paige. The standards have absolutely plummeted. I know, Paige agreed, scrolling through her phone. And they put me in cabin 4 instead of 6. I specifically wanted 6 for the client viewing tomorrow. The lighting is all wrong in 4. Uncle Richard swirled his bourbon. I heard some faceless investor bought the place, probably going to ruin it with cost-cutting. No. Respect for tradition. Joel shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should leave a review. Might help them improve. I took a slow sip of water, letting the ice clink against my teeth. I'm sure management is aware of your concerns. Marcus approached with a bottle of champagne, a white napkin draped precisely over his arm. He caught my eye, the slightest lift of his eyebrow. Ready? I nodded once. Now. The crystal chime of his spoon against glass silenced the dining room. Forks paused midway to mouths. Conversations drifted into stillness. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests of Pine Rock Lake Resort, Marcus began, his voice carrying to every corner. Tonight we have the honor of formally introducing someone very special. Over the past 6 months, Pine Rock has undergone subtle but significant changes under new leadership, upgrades to our sustainability practices, improvements to staff benefits, and a renewed commitment to treating all our guests with equal respect. Charlene frowned, whispering loudly to Paige. What's this about? We're trying to eat. Marcus continued. We're proud to recognize our new managing partner, whose vision is shaping the future of Pine Rock, Ms. Valerie Benton. The dining room erupted in polite applause as I rose from my chair. Paige choked on her wine, red droplets splattering her white blouse. Charlene froze, fork suspended between plate and mouth, a piece of salmon dangling precariously. Uncle Richard's tumbler slipped from his fingers, bourbon splashing onto the tablecloth. Joel's face drained of color, his eyes wide with shock, recognition, and something else, perhaps a decade of willful blindness, suddenly cleared. I walked to the front of the dining room, shoulders squared, chin lifted. The woman they never truly saw now commanded every eye in the room. My heels struck the hardwood floor with purpose, each step marking the distance between who I was and who I am. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear. Pine Rock has always been a special place, a sanctuary where guests come to reconnect with nature and themselves. I scanned the dining room, meeting curious gazes. As the new managing partner, my commitment is to ensure every guest receives the same exceptional experience, regardless of their last name or how many years they've been coming. Here, my eyes found Joel's. He stared back, a man witnessing a solar eclipse without proper protection. No exceptions. No discounts. No legacy perks. I continued. Just honest, equal service for everyone who chooses to spend their time with us. I returned to our table, a leather portfolio tucked under my arm. The whispers followed me, like ripples in water. Charlene attempted recovery, her social smile strained at the edges. Valerie, darling, she began, voice honeyed with false warmth. What a delightful surprise. Why, didn't you tell us about this little venture of yours? I set the portfolio on the table. You never asked, Charlene, about this or about me for 10 years. I opened the folder, extracting several documents with practiced precision. Page. All unauthorized subletting of resort property has been terminated. Effective immediately. I slid the first document across the table. Your client showing tomorrow has been canceled, and the client notified. Page's mouth opened and closed like a hooked fish. I turned to Uncle Richard. Expired leases have been reviewed. You have 30 days to vacate cabin 11, which will then return to regular inventory. Finally, I faced Charlene, sliding a sealed envelope toward her. This contains documented complaints from staff regarding your behavior over the past decade, along with a draft press release about Pine Rock's new harassment-free workplace policy. I stood, gathering my portfolio. I have an early meeting about the resort's renewable energy installation. Enjoy your dessert. The chocolate soufflé is particularly good tonight. Walking away, I felt 10 years of silence lifting from my shoulders. Behind me, their carefully constructed social facade crumbled like sandcastles at high tide. Joel followed me out, catching my arm in the lobby. His face showed the first genuine recognition of who I was, who I'd always been. Valerie, he whispered, his voice strangled. I had no idea. That, I said quietly, has always been our problem. The cabin door clicked shut behind Joel. He stood in the entryway, his silhouette darkened against the moonlight filtering through the windows. I sat in the armchair by the stone fireplace, legs tucked beneath me, a glass of Cabernet untouched on the side table. Why didn't you tell me? His voice hung in the air between us, not accusatory, just hollow. I looked up from the dancing flames. You never asked about this or about me for 10 years. The truth settled around us like dust after an explosion. Joel moved to the couch across from me, his academics posture now slumped with the weight of revelation. I thought we were happy, he said. No. I took a sip of wine, letting the tannic warmth coat my tongue. You were comfortable. I was invisible. Outside the window, Pine Rock Lake reflected the stars, the same view that had witnessed my decision 1 year ago. The mountains stood sentinel, unchanged by human dramas playing out in their shadow. All those meetings, the late nights working. Just another consulting project I finished for him. That's what you always called my work, Joel. Just little projects, nothing important enough to ask about. He rubbed his palms against his knees, a nervous habit from our first date that once endeared him to me. Now it just underscored the stranger sitting across from me. What happens now, he asked. You pack, I replied, my voice level, the product of months practicing this moment. I will stay. I'll have the papers sent to your office next week. No anger filled the space between us, no shouting, just the quiet acknowledgement of a relationship built on silence, his unwillingness to see me, my unwillingness to demand being seen. Morning arrived with golden light spilling across the dock. I stood there, clipboard in hand, steam rising from my coffee mug into the crisp Montana air. Behind me, the resort sprawled with potential. Miss Benton. Resort manager Thomas Morgan approached with a folder. The sustainability proposals you requested. Thank you, Thomas. I took the folder, our professional exchange unmarred by the family drama still reverberating through the property. Has Mrs. Benton Sr. checked out yet? Left at dawn. Miss Page is still packing. She asked about scheduling a meeting with you regarding a potential partnership. I allowed myself a small smile. Tell her my calendar is full for the foreseeable future. I walked the property as the sun climbed higher, nodding to groundskeepers who straightened at my approach, not from fear, but respect. The architect in me saw not what was, but what could be. Solar panels along the southern roof lines, restored wetlands at the lake's edge, staff housing with dignity built into every detail. In the main office, I paused before a wall map of the property. With a red marker, I circled a small peninsula jutting into the lake. This cabin. I told Thomas I want it renovated as my permanent residence. The old boathouse. It needs substantial work. I know exactly what it needs. I traced the shoreline with my finger. Privacy. Sustainability. A place that's truly mine. Joel's suitcases stood by the door when I returned to our cabin that evening. His academic papers cleared from the desk, his books boxed by the fireplace. I found a position at Pacific Northwest University, he said, his voice tinged with something like regret. I'll be gone by morning. I nodded, the weight of a decade lifting from my shoulders. I wish you well, Joel. Did you ever love me? He asked, his last attempt to understand. I considered lying, offering comfort in our final moments. Instead, I gave him the truth he'd never sought before. I loved who I thought you could be.